What happens when a philosophy professor finds proof that memories can be engineered like files? He didn't know his most dangerous student was already watching. What followed didn't just rewrite the past, it shattered the idea of truth itself. The Woman in Black. It started like any Tuesday, Grant's coffee lukewarm, the faculty printer jammed, and 30 half-awake students blinking under the flicker of fluorescent lights. He was halfway into a lecture about epistemology, waving a dry marker like a sword, when she appeared. Not walked in. Not creaked open the door. She appeared, seated in the back corner of the lecture hall like she'd been there all along, though every seat had been empty 5 minutes earlier. She wore black. Not business black. Funeral black. Elegantly creased, no lint, no fray, and not a wrinkle in sight. Her eyes, sharp as shattered obsidian, locked onto Grant's before he even noticed her hand wasn't raised. "Do you believe truth can be engineered?" she asked. No hello. No context. Just a sniper's question shot into the room. Half the students turned, suddenly wide awake. The others pretended not to notice. Grant, ever the seasoned philosopher, paused just long enough to swallow a knot of irritation. "That's a complex question," he replied, giving himself time. "It depends how you define engineered." She didn't smile. Didn't blink. "You already have." And with that, she stood, walked down the steps like a metronome in heels, only she wasn't wearing any, and placed a slim manila envelope on his podium. No name. No words. Then turned and vanished through the double doors like a magician exiting her final act. Grant stood frozen. Then, after a beat, cracked open the envelope. Inside, one grainy black and white photo. A boy, 8, maybe 9, standing in front of a squat, windowless building labeled Civic Records Archive, Milton District. The photo was dated April 15, 1993. On the back, scrawled in ink that bled slightly through the paper, "You taught the man who buried this." Grant blinked hard. He didn't teach children. Didn't mentor high schoolers. But that date, that building, those details punched something loose in the filing cabinet of his mind. April 1993 was the month he'd flown to Washington, D.C., for a supposedly fringe think tank summit on cognitive data migration. The same month he presented a paper titled Identity and the Elastic Mind. A paper that was laughed at. Mocked. Then, conveniently, forgotten. Until now. Back in his office, he dug through a dust-caked box labeled Symposia Old. Tucked behind a torn folder was a copy of the guest list from D.C. in 1993. There it was, M. Eleanor Mason. Scribbled in pen. No university affiliation. He hadn't thought of her in decades. But the name rang out now like a fire bell. Grant didn't hesitate. He picked up his landline, a clunky rotary that never quite fit in the digital age, and dialed a number he wasn't supposed to remember. "It's Grant," he said when the line clicked. "I need access to the Milton Civic Records. The old ones." A pause. A breath. Then, "You never got this number from me." "Copy that." That night, under a moon that looked like it wanted nothing to do with him, Grant drove east. The Civic Records building sat like a tombstone behind an abandoned post office. The front door was boarded but the side entrance just barely cracked open. Like someone had invited him in. He stepped inside, swallowed by darkness and the moldy breath of forgotten government paper. Rows of filing cabinets stood like soldiers. The air was thick with secrets that had expired but not decomposed. He moved with purpose. As if he'd dreamt this layout before. At the far wall, he spotted a drawer labeled E. Mason Custody Adjustment Authorization. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside, a slim folder. 2 pages. One name scratched out, the other written in crisp block letters, Charles Mason. A second paper clung to the back, a memo on letterhead from a now-defunct department, Civic Integration, Division 4A. The memo's subject, Subject CM Phase 2 Memory Ledger Compliance. Grant's breath hitched. A rustle behind him. He turned slowly. The woman in black stood at the threshold. Not a hair out of place. You know what comes next, she said. He didn't. But her voice, steady, cold, absolute, made him wonder if she did. Tension's rising, and we're only one chapter deep. Don't blink. The woman in black doesn't ask unless she already knows the answer. The ledger beneath the floor. It was a quiet room, the kind that looked like it had once been loud. Dust danced through a thin column of moonlight spilling in from a high, grimy window. Grant didn't move. Neither did she. The silence stretched between them like a power line, one flick and the whole thing could spark. What is this really about? He finally asked. His voice, raspy, like it had aged 10 years since that morning. Her answer was not words but motion. She stepped aside, gesturing toward the cabinet behind her. Grant hesitated, then opened it. A hole. Not a drawer. Not a shelf. A clean, square opening in the floor, carved into the concrete beneath a false drawer front. Inside, a box. Black metal, unmarked. The kind of box that whispers classified before you even touch it. Grant lifted it, surprised by the weight. Cold. Heavy. Intentional. She didn't stop him. He placed it on a nearby table, hesitated again, then opened it. Inside, a series of bound notebooks, each marked with a number and a year. Handwritten. Page after page of memories. Not his. Not anyone's he knew. But vivid, specific, and intimate. Names. Places. Fears. Secrets. Whose are these? He asked. Everyone's, she said. And no one's. He flipped through them. One entry described a night in 1987 where a woman cried over a wedding dress she never wore. Another recounted a conversation with a father, dated 3 years before the man's official date of death. These aren't just records, he whispered. They're altered histories. She nodded. Grant's head spun. He backed away. Why me? You published the theory, she said. Elastic identity. You asked if memory could bend. They built the box to prove it could break. A laugh escaped him. Hollow. They? Who the hell are they? She didn't blink. Division 4A. He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. That division doesn't exist. Exactly. Something thumped above them. A vent shifted. Grant snapped his head up. We're not alone anymore, she said. She moved to the wall, pulled back a panel, revealing a narrow tunnel. If you want answers, we go deeper. If you want out, now's your last easy chance. Grant stared into the darkness. God help me, he muttered and followed her in. We're on the edge now. Everything you thought was strange. Multiply it by 10. Stay close because what's coming next doesn't ask permission. Below the ledger. The tunnel felt like it had been chiseled out of paranoia. Low ceiling, walls close enough to graze his shoulders, no lights except what bled from the flashlight she handed him, one of those heavy-duty ones that doubled as a blunt weapon. Where are we going? Grant whispered. Where they stored what didn't fit the narrative. The air grew cooler with every step, and Grant's breath became visible in pale bursts. After 10 minutes of silence and downward slope, they reached a rusted door sealed with a keypad. She pressed her palm flat against the steel. Nothing. Then she spoke, Mason. Eleanor. Division 4A, black clearance. A hiss. The door opened. Inside, a massive room. Rows of steel shelves stacked with boxes identical to the one above, but older, some rusted shut, some half open with pages spilling like intestines. The place smelled like forgotten history, and bureaucracy gone moldy. Grant moved down an aisle. Pulled a folder. Inside, an entire family's erased relocation. A town wiped from maps. A politician who never ran, and yet there he was in photos shaking hands in 3 different countries. These are lives, Grant whispered. Not stories. Lives. She joined him, flipping through a dossier marked 2002. A test site, she said. They ran their first wave in rural areas. Memory slippage. Behavioral resets. You're telling me these people were rewritten? They never knew. Footsteps echoed. Grant turned. Two men in suits entered, no visible weapons. One held up a badge, compliance retrieval. Step away from the records. Eleanor didn't flinch. Too late. The lights flickered. A sharp click, Grant had backed against a shelf, hand landing on a switch. A siren wailed. Now you've done it, she muttered. The room erupted into red strobes. Emergency protocol. The suits lunged. Eleanor grabbed Grant and ran. Through aisles, under pipes, over crates marked Do Not Index. A second door burst open. Daylight. They emerged into a service alley behind the archive building, lungs burning. Grant gasped. What the hell was that? She looked back once. Proof. They didn't just hide the truth. They reshaped it. She handed him a flash drive. This is your insurance. Everything from that room, digitized. He stared at it. I can't do this alone, he said. You won't have to, she replied. Sirens neared. Eleanor melted into the shadows. Grant clutched the flash drive like a relic. This wasn't the end. It was the first chapter rewritten. They thought he'd forget. They thought she was a ghost. They were wrong.